of other folks that are here. Annalise Lane is in our organization. She's our lending professional, and she not only brings residential expertise, but a ton of commercial knowledge. So she's not one single topic. She can bring a lot of advice on a lot of different areas on the financing side. And Joel Funston, who has typically been your point of contact, he's away today. Sends his regards. I was offering to videotape him in, but he said that would probably not be a bad idea. He was a fan of the bathing suit. So we let that one go. So as we continue to try to develop value, I think it's appropriate that you guys pick the topic that you picked, because the gentleman to my right, his name is Dan Caramanico. And, oh, by the way, in your emails, Debbie dropped some PDFs, electronics, some basic stuff about art. But this is the impressive part of the program. So 30 years ago, I met Dan, and Dan taught me how to make a cold call. Many, many years ago, and then after that, he has group I had put it back on, changed my belief system, changed the way I manage myself, my business, my sales activities, my mindset. The impact it had on me professionally, from an income perspective, was it quintupled my potential. That's 5 times. And when I thought it was enough already, Coach kept saying, "You're reaching too low." And none of it was rah-rah, and none of it was the typical processes you understand. So before I bring Dan up, I'm going to give Dan a 5-minute commercial that I really don't know about Dan, what he does, except what I know and love about Dan. But I'll read the resume. You mind? That's what I try to read. For over 25 years, Dan has been the founding principal of Caramanico Associates. He's worked with thousands of salespeople and hundreds of companies helping to reach their maximum sales potential. He's been a pioneer in the emerging field of Salesforce development, which takes a comprehensive approach to new growth and sales teams. Co-author of 2 books along with Marie McGuire, The Optimal Salesperson and Optimal Selling Sales Conversations of Other Optimal Salespeople. Before founding Caramanico McGuire, Mr. Caramanico was for 10 years serving in sales and management at small, large firms. He began his career in engineering, moved up the scales quickly, has master's degrees from Wharton and University of Pennsylvania in too many topics that I don't understand. But without further ado, a man that has meant the world to my career as a sales player, and I'm most proud of the fact that I can call him my friend, Dan Caramanico, ladies and gentlemen.
So I have to live up to, but I think Robert, as good as he is, I think he screwed up because I didn't hear him introduce his work. So I didn't hear that word. I just wanted to hear it. But I didn't want to cause a lot of trouble with this.
That's not minor.
I got to talk about it. I may have to come. See, I have a mark. He's trying to record it. So there's a leaf here. I got to stand there. So I'm going to move it up, bring it up there. Can you hear me? All right. I've never been accused of being too soft of a speaker. But, so you'll see in the agenda there, 4 things we're going to cover. There's a lot that he's got a hook he's going to drag you off here in about 5 or 4. And you'll see there's a cautionary tale, there's a couple sales techniques we're going to cover, and then questions at the end. But you'll see some of the techniques are backwards when we teach you. So I like to do things different. So I know you thought I was going to talk for half an hour and then you could think up some questions, but I could talk all day about what I think is important in sales, but I'd like to make sure I cover at least something of what you think is important. So what we're driving over here, so there's this guy talking about sales. I sure hope he covers this. So what were you thinking you were hoping I was going to cover? Or were you just here for the food? Anybody?
I'll throw one out there. The market's changing. Slowing, maybe the place for the lines. What are we doing when it's not as easy?
That's part of the cautionary tale. Anybody? Yeah. Part of my job is to make you a little uncomfortable. So I said, I'm going to have at least 15 minutes to get it open. I don't
when you ask, pretty much. I mean, it's embarrassing.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite topics. Anybody else?
Didn't hear what you said. What was his favorite topic?
I wanted to find out how to get my own rear end off my, out of,
Probate fund?
you get to a certain age where, Netflix looks pretty good. And him was in trouble, so I put him back there.
Anybody else before we launch it? We're gonna do the agenda from the bottom up. Okay, so look. You'll see that chart that's got all the circles there. And this is a minimized version of the attributes of what an optimal salesperson is. First you need personal goals. So what's your first name? John. So the first thing is you need to have actual personal goals, not some goal that Dave Springer comes up with. We need all our agents to do this much, and even if we're independent contractors, really can't do that, right? So you need to, like, why am I doing? Why am I working? Like, why do I put myself through this sacrifice? So you have to write them down, right? So they need to have personal goals. Then you need to be motivated to get there. The opposite sides of the motivation point are desire and commitment. You have to really, really want to get there. So don't pick some goal like, I'd like to do two deals a month or something. Something that's challenging. Is anybody familiar with the term BHAG? No? There's a big business book written by Jim Collins in the 90s, and it stands for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. And so set some goal, that's outside your comfort zone. Right, but not just some goal. Yeah, well, I've been averaging about 3 deals a month, so I'm going to do 5. Why am I doing 5? What am I going to do with all that money I get? Because that's what's important, not what you're going to do, but why you're going to do it. Then you need to be committed to do whatever it takes to get there. Not anything that's unethical, immoral, illegal, or physically unsafe. But just because it's uncomfortable for me to ask the question doesn't mean I don't ask it. Right? Just because it's uncomfortable for me to go meet somebody, do something that's not comfortable that I haven't done before, it doesn't mean I don't do it, right? Okay, so now we have a goal. We're motivated to get there. On the left hand side, you see right hand side. There's a sales plan. You need a sales activity plan. If I was going to do 5 deals, how many people do I have to talk to? I'll tell you a quick story about Robin's good friend, John Voltaire. Anybody know him? He's moved out of the area, but he was a client years and years ago as a realtor. He was doing about $60,000 a year in commissions. He came to me, and he was a good student, and he learned some good techniques and he did stuff. But I couldn't get him to track his activity. He wouldn't identify how much activity he had to do. He wouldn't track it. But his income went from 60 to about 100, 120, something like that. And then he disappeared. He stopped coming to training classes. I didn't see him for like 3 or 4 months. He called me up on July 15th, this whatever year that was, back in the early 90s. He said, I need your help. I got sidetracked. I never have to use this. I got sidetracked. He owned some property. He had a hammer. He was fixing things. He was doing stuff. He said, I've only done 2 deals since March. He said, you need to get me back on track to where, that's what he was doing. He was doing that at once. He said, get me back to 2 deals a month, which is where I found him, right? He said, I'll do whatever you want. You just got to get me back there. I said, you'll do anything? He said, yeah, I'll do anything. You'll track your activity? He said, not that. You kidding me? He said, I got to fill out that stupid form of yours. I said, John, I don't care what form you use. And I said, look, you said you'd do anything. So we agreed that he would keep track of it in his date planners when they had cell phones and stuff. And he would come to class every week, allow me to coach him. And that was the 15th of July. By the end of July, he did 2 transactions. I don't know that they went to settlement, but he agreed on it. Right? In August, he did 4. In September, he did 5. And his fiscal year started on October 1. In the next fiscal year, he did $196,000. So he doubled what he had done before. So then he started building, and he ultimately, over the next couple of years, he built his practice up to about $1 million a year in commission. Now, he didn't do it all. He only did about $600,000. He had some teammates that did something like that. So John, that's sort of the answer. It was the personal goals, and he was willing to do whatever it takes. He didn't want to track the activity, right? And he was willing to do it, and he got out of his comfort zone, and that kept him on track. He asked me to train some people he had hired to make some phone calls for him, and we said how many he has. I said, how many people you have to talk to get it done? He had his 2.83. That's the two decimal places. How much activity he had to do on a daily basis. Okay, but the real secret to success in sales, look, you need sales techniques, right? Sales techniques are good. One day I'm in front of a class of about 30 people. I've been working with Robert and a bunch of other people that doubled and tripled their income by that time. And we were going over some sales technique for the umpteenth time with this group of people, and it suddenly dawned on me. I said, the guy that had doubled and tripled their out, it's not because they got really, really good at a particular sales technique. And the one I was teaching at the time was reversing the strategy, answering every question with a question. I said, the guys that have doubled and tripled their income aren't in this class. Right? I was doing some personal coaching with them, and it occurred to me that what they had happened was that they changed their belief. Look, success in sales has more to do with belief systems than it does with anything else. And here's what I mean. A belief is a firmly held conviction about the way things are. If I have a belief, I have data, I have proof, I have evidence and experience. And if you don't share my belief, then in my mind, you just don't get it. Ever run anything with that? Okay. I run into all the time with training class. Right? Now, here's how it affects your sales, and this is why most sales training programs fail. Pretty strange thing for me to say. Something that business. So a very common belief that salespeople have is that people buy based on price. So let's say I take that person that has that belief, and I put them in training for 2 days, and I teach them 5 time-tested, proven sales techniques to sell value over price. So that at the end of the second day, they have these techniques down cold. And I have video of them executing the techniques flawlessly. There isn't even any background there, so I can hear it clearly. What I didn't do in those 2 days is I did not change their belief. We didn't even talk about it. So they come out with the same belief they went in with, namely that people buy based on price. 3 days later, they get in front of a prospect. They say, so Debbie, how are you going to make the decision? She says, well, we're going to go with low price. We're going to go with low price. What happens to the sales techniques that I taught my salespeople? They're out the window. So it makes sense to me. That's what I would do. I told Caramanico he was crazy. And they have another data point to reinforce the belief that they were in. So it turns out you can only execute sales techniques that your belief systems will let you execute. I can check back with that salesperson, my newly minted salesperson, in 6 months, and those techniques are still in the plastic wrapper they came in, right? They're unused because it never seemed like a good time to use them, right? The problem is, I used to do this exercise. I'll just explain it to you since we're kind of short on time. Here's where I taught about this much about self-limiting beliefs. I say, okay, you know what a self-limiting belief is? Take out a piece of paper and a pencil. I want you to write down your top 10 self-limiting beliefs. Let's make this exercise. And people get their pencil, and I get my clock, ready to go. And they're sitting there like this. And I have 20 seconds of advice. I said, you should have 2 written down. Everybody's looking around, nobody's writing anything. I said, half a minute, 20 seconds. You should have 3 or 4 down there looking around and getting nervous. I never can stand 3 whole minutes, right? And it turns out, it's hard to recognize your own self-limiting belief, because to you, it's not a self-limiting belief, it's reality. I teach this stuff, sometimes they go, yeah, he should live in my world. That never happened. It's like, so you can't see it. Your self-limiting beliefs are like wind. Nobody's eyes are good enough to see wind. Nobody in here has ever seen wind. Because you can't focus enough to see the molecules of air moving. Right? What you can see is the effects of it. Right? So likewise, you can see the effects of the self-limiting belief. I'll give you an example. It's not from real estate. Well, I will. He was in this training program after we had gone through a lot of things. We had this thing called black belt. So there's a bunch of guys that didn't want to sit through movies, and so we worked on different things. Everybody, about 6 or 8 people in that group. We're supposed to bring a problem each month. If he comes with this problem, he says, I got a problem. I said, what's the problem? He says, it's up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. That was his belief. And I said, all right, let's talk about it. So I was in front of a whiteboard, I drew on the whiteboard. And he'd been in mortgage stuff maybe a year and a half, 2 years at that time. And I said, all right, what did you do the first month? What did you do the second month? What did you do the third month? I plotted the first quarter. And what did you do? I plotted the whole year. This is fine, and down there. Went there, quarter by quarter by quarter. And it went straight up. He said, no, where's this? I don't understand the up and down. Right? What are we talking about? That's because he was looking on a day-to-day basis. So his belief was, oh, I had an up month, I'm due for a down month. Right? And he gave you a hint of it. Constantly, he and I would work on it and say, all right, I'm doing X amount, but this looks like it's an anomaly. I can never be true. Would you think that? Right? It's a belief system. So when he issued the goal, I just said, okay, you got to think of the next thing. This is not in real estate business, but a guy who he sold filtration systems into manufacturing facilities, and he had what we call a money belief. It's one of his self-limiting beliefs. He was uncomfortable talking about money. Now, you guys that are realtors, somebody figured this out a long time ago. You don't have to talk about money that much. You just outsource it to him. Right? We don't have to talk about how much money you make. You don't have to have the uncomfortable conversation of what their income is. No, talk to my buddy Robert over here, maybe Annalise, right? And they take care of all those questions. Right? But with my guy Glenn, I was asked to review his forecast in his pipeline. He had this $1.2 million deal in the pipeline, and I said, all right. He's projecting to close in the first quarter. I said, well, what's the compelling reason to buy? Why are they really going to buy this thing? And he couldn't tell me that there was one. I said, well, given that they're going to buy it, are they going to buy it from you? Right? So there's two different things about the compelling reason to buy. One is that they're actually going to buy a new house, and one is that they're going to buy it through me. Right? So he couldn't give me that answer. And I said, now, did you talk to them about money? Right? He said, well, I sent him a proposal for $1.2 million. I said, well, did you talk to him about money before you sent him a proposal? He said, no. Do you know if that's a good number or a bad number? He said, no. So I said, gave him some coaching. I said, call him back on Monday, ask him these questions, find out if there's compelling reason to buy. So he was uncomfortable with asking some of those tough questions. But I made it more uncomfortable for him to come back and tell me he didn't ask the question, then it wasn't comfortable for him to ask. So he comes back Monday and he says, okay. And he gave me some 3 or 4 or 5 reasons. They were committed to buy. They were the leading candidate. I said, did you talk about money? No, they wouldn't tell you. I said, Glenn, there is no not telling you. They have to tell you. You are spending hours and hours and hours writing this big proposal, engaging engineers, doing all this work, and they're not paying you. They owe you something. Anyway, I gave him a bunch of coaching things to say for about 40 minutes. He calls me back an hour later. He says, okay, here's the deal. If we can get the price under $1 million, they'll place the order in the first week of March. I said, now it's a qualified prospect. Fast forward a year and a half, I'm debriefing a call with him and the sales manager, and he says, oh, we have this opportunity, $50,000 opportunity. What I think most we're going to be able to get is $41,000. I'm going to have to sharpen my pencil on that. See, I said, Glenn, you haven't even talked to the prospect. And you've already knocked $9,000 off your price. And you're negotiating with yourself. I said, can you at least talk to him first? Next week when we're doing the debriefing, he says, I said, how'd that feel? He says, okay, I told him it was going to be $49,000. I said, yeah, that's about what we thought. I felt like I should at least get a portion of that $9,000. I saved the company. You know? Anyway, so that's how belief systems work. And there are lots of beliefs about what I can say, who I can say it to, what I'm allowed to do, what I'm not allowed to do, how much money I can earn. So when you set that goal, you might say, there's no way I can do that. If that's yourself, I'll tell one of myself. I was new in this business. I didn't have any corporate accounts yet. I was only had individuals. And one of my guys who owned a business, he says to me, I went to have lunch with him, and he said, you know, this is a really great program, but he had to come to me to go to training. He said, but I wish you could come to my office and train my 4 guys instead of having us go to you. I said, oh, really? Why is that important to you? And we spent an hour of him telling me why it was a pain in the neck, if I go away became Russian, doing training, and blah, 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 blah. So, you know, I said, but I'd have to charge you more money. He said, yeah, well, let's meet Tuesday and we'll go over it. So with him and his wife, he was the admin of the company. I go home this was a Thursday, I tell my wife, and they go, I said, oh, I got this great opportunity with Joe Biden. And I knew him, I worked with him when I was back in the engineering. I said, yeah, he wants me to do an in-house. I said, I'd love to get $500. I'd love to get $750 a month. It was 4 hours of work a month. I'd love to get $750, but he's not going to pay any more than $500. My wife, based on nothing, no industry experience, no knowledge of the business, no knowledge of anything, she says it's got to be at least $1,000. I said, you're crazy. And we discussed this from Thursday to Tuesday, which was and I said, look, he doesn't even bill his own engineers out. I'll never, that's $125, and I remember this is like 32 years ago. He'll never pay more than $500. This is the last thing she said to me. She said, well, get $1,000 or don't come home. So I said, now, I didn't think she was serious, but I couldn't afford to take the chance, right? So I went and I met with them. I'm sitting across the table from them, and so we rehashed what I was going to do, and they said, so what did you come up with? I said, well, I was thinking it would be $1,000. And it was hard for me to get that out of my mouth. They looked at each other and looked at each other, smiled, and said, fine. And in that moment I knew that number was too low. They were ready to give it. And the number, I thought it was double what I thought I could get. So guess what? About a month, 6 weeks later, I'm in front of another client with the exact same number of hours, for the exact same service I'm going to do twice a month, 2 hours each time. And this time I tell him it's $2,500. And he says, okay. So about another month and a half after that, I get in front of another guy. And I said, once a month. I said, well, 2,500 sounds pretty good. And so he said, fine. All right. And so the key, it's not about the money. It's about getting out of your comfort zone. And you have to pay attention to what you do, what you avoid doing, what you say, and what you avoid saying, and how you react to what other people say. Right? It's all about the thesis. Robert did, what did you say, quintuple his income? He didn't quintuple his income or whatever number it was by getting really, really good at sales techniques. Yeah, it's important to be good at sales techniques. But if you only can get one thing out of what I said, this, it's not a secret because I tell everybody I run into. Right? I'm a sales guy. Identify what those belief systems are. And if you hear yourself saying, oh, that'll never happen. Right? Napoleon Hill in 1948, I'm sad to say it was actually alive, although I wasn't but it's called Think and Grow Rich. And what he said was, whatever the mind can conceive and believe, you can achieve. And his theory was, you have to be a little bit religious in his theory, but his theory was, it would be a pretty sadistic God who would give you the ability to see something and believe you could get it without the ability to actually get it. So I always constantly work on my belief systems first. So before I had a client call me up, I was doing training for his people, and I'd never managed a sales team. I mean, I'd done plenty of management, I just hadn't managed a sales team. They called me up and said, this VP called us and said, Bill wants you to know if you would take over managing the team. And I knew that my belief system would get my way, because my instinct, I was trying to recruit a sales manager and we weren't finding the right candidates. And I said, okay, how about we talk tomorrow? It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Monday. Because I knew that my belief system would cost me a ton of money, right? And so I stopped everything else I was doing, and I worked on whatever. My first thought was maybe $10,000 a month, because I was doing this part-time. Maybe $10,000 a month. Then I ran some spreadsheets. All I was doing was trying to work on what my belief was, what I could trust. And I worked myself up to $20,000 a month. And she agreed too easily. So I said, okay, so I did it twice. The time I spent was working. I was working on my belief. You know what? They got acquired by Cenci. You know Cenci, they're $30, $40 billion, $50 billion right now. Government contractor. And they brought me in to do some stuff. I said, well, let's try 26,000. So it's just, you have to work on your belief. So it's not all about, I'll give you money examples, but it's what you can say to somebody. I had a young realtor one time, he got in front of a big listing. He thought it was important that he looked busy. So he had a couple of his buddies. He was new, he got in front of this is 25 years ago, he got in front of a listing that was going to be 450,000. So he got it. He got in front of a couple of his buddies to page him while we did it. It turns out his mother paged him and somebody else paged him. And the woman said she didn't hire him. You know why? She thought he was too busy. But he created that problem with his own belief system. Right? So I just advise you to pay attention to what I do. So what I'm going to do in the last 15, 20 minutes here is give you 2 sales. Any questions about this?
If you are experienced, do you know yourself within the belief? And if you are a rookie, could you be aware of yourself?
My experience is you generally don't know.
So how do you know?
You have to know by watching what you do and what you do. You have to kind of know what you're looking for. But look, you don't need to go to a sales training program to figure out what you want. So so for example, if you're this John right here, he believed that he had to have a Mercedes to sell real estate. And so he would get in front of he was working in some lower class neighborhood where the houses were 90 to 100,000 or something like that. And he had this $40,000 Mercedes, and he believed he needed that to show that he had credibility. So, and then this one prospect was giving him a hard time, and I said, John, do you realize your car is worth half as much as this house? I mean, come on. So I forbid him. I said, he was afraid to go after the bigger deals, right? So I said, you are forbidden. He said that I have the ability to forbid him from doing anything. I said, you're forbidden to sell any house that's under $125,000. It's not worth your time. Refer to someone taking 1% commission or whatever the split was. I said, and you only work on bigger ones. Right? You know what he did? After he got his belief system in line, he said, why do I need this Mercedes? Right? It's not a useful car for being a girl. So you know what he did? He gave that car to his wife and bought a Jeep. Right? Where you can put signs in the back and trap people around in the snow. So Robert, typically you're not aware of it. You should be a little bit sensitized to it if you just watch what you do and what you avoid doing. And what you say and what you avoid saying. The other thing to do is, when I got in this business, I had tons of stuff. I'm really good at helping people get over them because I had them. All right? And so I'd go to the conferences for a franchise, right? I'd go to the conference, and here comes this guy. He's just sold a $60,000 deal. So that was a big deal back then. Some of my colleagues would say, what did you say to get that deal closed? This is when some of my engineering background. I said, the probability of me being in front of somebody when the exact thing he said is going to be the thing I need to say. So what I would do is go say, Carl, what were you thinking? What made you think you could sell this $60,000 deal? Right, so I could get his mindset, so I could condition my own mind. My theory was, if he can do it, then I ought to. So it's all about, if you see somebody, ask other people that are more successful than you, kind of, what are they thinking? What's their belief about it?
How do you change your belief system?
Oh, the secret. I don't find it that
Yeah,
Got
you
it.
repeat the question.
Yeah, he said, how do you change it? It's not that hard, actually. It's hard, but there's no mystery about how to do it. So if you're uncomfortable talking about money or something, you know what you have to do? Talk about money. You have to be willing to get out of your comfort zone, right? Just get out of your comfort zone and do it. You're willing to fail, right? It takes emotional energy, not physical energy. It takes emotional energy to do it. Some of the other ones are things like need for approval. But it's more important to me that you like me than that you do it. Now, if I'm more worried about whether you like me than whether I'm going to do business, I won't execute any technique I perceive to be aggressive. It's too risky. I'd rather have you like me than have you money. And you'll see what you're afraid to ask, right? And then I trap myself. Sometimes I say, listen, George, one of my problems is I always forget to talk about money. So if I start to leave here, we haven't talked about money, could you do me a favor and remind me? Right? I did this a few times, and I knew it was more important to me that people like me. I had that with big one. And so this is what my coach told me to do. He said, before you start finding what their pain is, and all that, say, look, what's your first name again?
John.
John? Say, John, look, before we get started, I just want to let you know, can I deal with my biggest problem up front? They always would say, yes. My coach told me to do this. I said, look, at the end of this call, it's more important to me that we stay friends than whether or not we do business. So at any time you feel too much pressure, like feeling like too much, you just raise your hand, let me know, I'll just end the call. I told Mike, I said, you're out of your mind. But you know what? As soon as I did that, I didn't care so much. So those are so radical, but basically just figure out what it is you're afraid of. You watch what you're doing. Why am I not calling on these people? Why am I not going out and farming? Why am I not going and networking? Why am I not doing this? It's not so important why you're not doing it. I can put you in psychoanalysis for 2 years, right? And we'll find out that your mother kicked you when you were 3. It could have been your father, right? And now what? We're 2 years down the road, you still got the damn problem. So it doesn't matter how it got there. It doesn't really matter what it is. It just matters that you're uncomfortable and say, all right, I got to go talk to them. If it takes 100 units of emotional energy to overcome weakness, and you put 80%, you put 80 units of emotional energy in there, you are not 80% of the way to fixing the problem. You're still 0, right? You have to overcome it. One time I was trying to get to another level of activity. I was trying to get over 50. I could get to 48. I could get to 46. I was tracking my activity. I just couldn't get to 50. I was working on some sort of self-learning loop, which I can't remember what it was now. All of a sudden, the next month, I did 45 one month, 106 the next. Because the belief system was. And then I couldn't do less than 75 if I tried. Right? So I know it's an unsatisfying answer, but identify the problem and then just do the opposite. If I'm afraid to talk about money, talk. I'm afraid to get in front of that person, go talk. You'll find out. Whatever you're afraid of, that stuff never doesn't happen. I get people say, well, what if they say this? What if they say that? What if they do? I give them some techniques for some of that stuff. I say, look, none of it's going to happen. Just go out there and do it, and you'll find out that it's not good. What the monsters you dream up in your head are bigger than the ones that are going to fight you. Other stuff. All right, let's talk about the 2 sales techniques that John, you're going to be like guinea pig. This is a counterintuitive sales technique. It's probably the most powerful one I can give you. So here, if I take your hand like this and I pull, what's the immediate instant? Pull back. So if I come over, I'm going off camera, but I'll be right back. Come over here, and I go like this, right? Now outside of hit, what's this immediate instant? They come toward me, right? So if I want John to engage his muscle structure, to come toward me, what should I do? Push or pull? I should push. So here's what selling looks like, finding pain. Finding a compelling reason. Here's what it looks like. I warn you, this is a physical metaphor. This is not what you actually do in sales. What you do is you push on John. He comes toward me, I back up. I push on him again. He comes toward me, I back up. And I keep doing that until he gives up and buys something. All right? So now let me give you what it actually sounds like. The first thing is, do not ask leading questions. Okay? Don't ask leading questions, because you say, are you looking for are you unhappy with the school system you're in? The prospect, any prospect can see, in a nanosecond, they can say, if I say yes to that, that's good for Dan. What's good for him cannot be good for me. And so they say, no, not really. And they can just have a discussion between husband and wife that they weren't happy with the school system. They're not doing it to you. So don't ask leading questions like that. Rather get used to asking questions in a negative way. Now, not something like you don't want to work with Springer because we suck. I mean, that's not. We call this the push away, right? But you want to say something like, look, I'm assuming your school system is good, right? And I'm assuming. That's a good format for it. I'm assuming that. So why would you want to move out of this house? Here's an example. The company I told you that asked me to ultimately manage their sales team. But when I first went to work for them, I did a half-day program one time. 3 years later, they called me back. I go meet with the CEO. He's telling me about his business, and he says they're growing 50% a year. He wants to know if I'll coach the sales team. And I said to him, Bill, you're growing 50% a year. Why would you need sales training? Does that sound like it's something a salesperson would say? Say, oh, you need sales. This is what a typical sales guy would say. Say, oh, you need sales training. Well, I'm your guy. Yep, I've worked a lot for him. Let me tell you all my dozen of them. I said, why would you need sales training to grow 50% a year? He said, because it's only grown because I have my hand on the sales function, and I need to spend more time being a CEO. I said, so what's the end game? He said, I want somebody who can pay me for this company, and I have to work on it. So that was so just by, and then he asked me, can you coach my salespeople? What do you think my answer was? Huh?
No.
No. But at least he's learning, right? He didn't give the answer. He knew not to say yes. No, most people say, sure, absolutely. What did I say? I don't know. I said, I don't know. Why didn't I know? Because I didn't know. He said, you don't know. I said, well, I don't know your people. First of all, I don't, and I told him I had to tell him a little bit about self-learning, because I don't know if they have self-learning books, I don't know if they're really good at it, so I don't know if coaching's going to work. He said, well, how do we fix that? I said, well, we have to test everybody.
That's the question you're asking. You said, I don't know. Why would most people say sure rather than I don't know?
Because they were given an opening by the prospect to tell what they can do and what they can do. It sounds like an invitation. So they take it, but I didn't take it. Right? So I said, because I know this is a logical question, right? I mean, it wasn't a sales thing, it was an actual question I had. Why would you need it? So you can practice it in non-selling situations, like, if you're in a restaurant, most get free refills now, so you don't come up. You go to the waitress. You could say, hey, listen, can I trade the French fries for a salad? Can I trade the salad for a salad? Instead of doing that, just try it this way. Say, listen, there's probably no way I can trade this salad. And here's the reason why this is so powerful, is because they don't see it coming. They don't have any order. Like I'm speaking for men here. I don't shop, right? I don't go shopping. I go buying. If I go to like Men's Warehouse or Boyd's or something like that, I walk in. There's always somebody that's there to be your salesman, right? They walk up and say, "Can you help me?" Well, I went there to buy something. But it comes out of my mouth automatically. No thanks, I'm just looking. It's an automatic response. So if I was training those guys, here's what I tell them to say. You walk in, I say, listen, you're probably just looking, but you need help. I wouldn't get 3 steps away and say, no, I'm looking for a blue suit. Right? So the generalized statement of that push-away movement, don't do presenting the opposite type behavior to what the prospect is expecting. So you don't look like a salesperson, right? So I'm going to work by another client I went to, and I got referred to him by a sales training guy who couldn't close him, right? So I went to see him. This is what this prospect said to me. He goes, hi, how you doing? We were about the same age. He says, I said, Anthony, explain, exchange pleasantries for a while. I said, So Bob, so why am I here? Like, what's the issue? He said, well, I don't want to do sales training. Well, that's what the other guy tried to do. He tried to sell him sales training, tried to take his program and jam it down this guy's throat. I said, well, okay, that's not what I'm here. What's the issue? What's the problem? He said, well, my people. So now I recognize that as he's just protecting himself. He said, well, my salespeople, I've been telling them for 9 months they need to call in new customers, but they keep calling the same ones. I said, well, why? Do they not know who to call, or is it a technique? They said, no, they know who to call. I said, well, then why aren't they calling? Again, notice I'm challenging him. You pushing him away. You got to tell me why am I here? I said, is it a self-limiting belief or is it a technique? He said, what's a self-limiting belief? Oh, just what I told you guys. So that took like 2-3 minutes, and then he said, I don't know. He said, so what do we do? I said, well, you should test it. Find out if there's something we can do so I can figure out whether or not they can keep their motivation. I gave like 3 minutes of what you should do. He said, well, can you send me? He said, how much would it cost? I said, how many people you got? I said, 10,000. He said, can you send me a proposal? We wanted to talk for 30 minutes. I said, no. He says, no. So now he's saying, I'm the prospect. You should do what I ask. I said, look. He said, no. I said, look. What's the proposal going to tell you? It's going to tell you one assessment, $10,000. You already know that, right? Don't you want to see what one looks like so you can make a judgment of whether it's worth it? He said, that makes sense. So why don't you write back next week and I'll tell you, then you can make a decision, right? So I'm now going to illustrate the second sales technique that I was going to give you, right? It's called the upfront agreement. And I said, so why don't I come back next week? I'll show you the assessment, and at the end of that meeting, you can make a decision whether you want to buy it. And he said, that's fine, I can do that. He said, can I have my general manager in the meeting? I said, absolutely. He said, so I set a time I come back. So now I have a person, I know what his pain is, I know how much, he knows how much money he can draw. I know he's the decision maker, right? So I have a totally qualified prospect, and I have an agreement that he's going to make a decision when I show up on Monday. Now, if I set you all up with 5 appointments next week, all of them homeowners that had, or buyers, right, that had pain, that had enough money to take care of the pain, that were decision makers, and agreed to make a decision based on what you had to tell them, I'm going to take the orders. This is the audience participation part of the program. He's got his hand up. If you just raise your hand when you say 5. 5. Anybody else? Somebody wants to learn this? Yeah. And if you're an engineer type, you might say something like 3.73, 2 times square root of 5, or something like that. But you'd have a high probability of closing them. And what have I not done that most salespeople would have done by now? I didn't show him my listing presentation, right? I didn't show him anything. But he told me he could close all 5, but I didn't show him anything. So I show up on Monday, on the following Monday, and John is in there. Another John. His actual name was John. This is the big guy, he's the operations manager, not a sales guy. He hated sales guys, especially his own sales guy. And he sits there like this. I'm not a big body language guy, but I think I can read that body language. He said, so here's how Bob introduces me to John. Now, after that first meeting, he said, I don't want to do sales training. He said, he never mentioned training again in that whole 40-minute meeting. He says, this is how he introduced me to John. He says, this is Dan, what he's going to do, he says it like it's already done. He says, what he's going to do is he's going to come in and evaluate the sales team, and then he's going to train them. And I just, I didn't say anything, but it's interesting. So now, Bob is sold, but John hates me already. And so I spent 45 minutes to an hour asking John about his salespeople, what he didn't like about them, and he unloaded, right? Look, you tell more about what you know by the questions you ask than by the statements you make. So this is sort of examples of proof of it. So I told minutes to an hour. John mostly just getting his pain out, and what he was unhappy with, and all that stuff. And the CEO, Bob, looks at John, and they exchange this knowing glance. They kind of nod, and Bob says, here's what we're going to do. We're going to evaluate the sales team. He said, we're definitely going to do it. He said, but I want my VP of sales to feel like he's part of this process. So can you come back next week and do this all over again with him in it? And I said, sure, right? Now, how much time do you think I spent going through this? I had this assessment of another sales team. It was this thick, three-ring binder, this thick. How much time do you think I spent going through it? I never opened it. He never saw it, right? Because he wanted more from just listening to me, right? Now, when we agreed to this, he said, well, next time when you come back, in a real pleading kind of way, he says, can you come back next week, can you bring a proposal? And I said, sure, I can do that. I said, put something in there about training too? He's asked me, I said, yeah, I did, because I know I need it. He wasn't ready for a proposal. So this upfront agreement, like if you can find pain, if you can get people to tell you what their compelling reason to buy is, and I'm going to give you one more example, real estate example. I know a realtor, they ask that, it's not what they want, it's why they want it, right? That's what the pain is, which is the motivating factor that causes them to buy, and the compelling reason, I like to call it. So this realtor was talking to his customer, and the customer said they wanted a garage. They wanted a basement, right? They wanted a basement, and he knew enough to ask why. He said, because he's a woodworker, and he wants, he likes to be woodworking, and he wants a place for his equipment and all. Okay. So he went out and he showed him some houses, and he ended up selling the house, I don't know, 2 weeks later, and the house didn't have a basement. But you know what it had? It had like a 4-car garage with a separate room, which is even better than a basement, because who wants to have a drill press in the basement and trying to, your spouse is trying to sleep and you're trying to drill wood, right? So he sold the house. But any other normal builder, what would they have done? Oh, this isn't a good thing because it doesn't have a basement, right? So that's the thing. So the key thing here is there's three points. Now I'll do the cautionary tale. Then first one, get the rest of the personal and the sales activity plan. You gotta have that. He put into that on day one. That's why he wants it quickly. He went to work for so he was working with his manager came to me. And she always wanted to know, how many deals are you going to close this month, right? And she said, I think it's a plan. They always had their sales, they put the plan on the desk, and they come to Robert and say, I got 16 deals. He had the numbers down to 2 decimal places what he was going to do. They go to the other mortgage brokers, the lenders in the room, and they go, how many deals are you going to do this month? Oh, let me see, and they never came anywhere near those numbers. He always hit the number because he knew his statistics, like baseball, they do for the batting averages and all that. So that's in track your activity. So you know, because your self-sabotage mechanism will say, you know what, this tracking is a waste of time. The time spent tracking is a minute spent tracking is a minute better spent making a phone call. And then you don't make the phone call and you don't track, and it tells you, and then you lose track, and then you wake up one day, you don't have to deal. All right, so what was that? What's that? Yeah. So the world is going to change. Right? I know real estate is really hot. It's been hot before. I know it's been cold before. The real estate business is weird. You think of it. Every time you go, nobody reads newspapers anymore. When it's a buyer's market or something, right? They'll get some big-time realtor come on CNN or somewhere and say, "Oh yeah, it's a buyer's, it's a seller's market or something like that." They just poison the entire pool of buyers. like no other industry do they do that. Say, okay, all your buyers out there, you have the leverage. You don't have to make a decision. So it's going to change, right? So make sure it's not always going to be this good. Now, I don't have a really good example from the real estate business, but I do from the mortgage business. I had this client, this prospect, and never became a client. And it was in one of these hot refi markets. And I talked to the owners of the company. They said, yeah, we know we're busy, but we know we need to purchase. We need to go talk to builders. We need to get, purchase loans and all of that. And they told me what they're paying, but they're too busy to do it. And I bugged them, and it wasn't a pest, but I set up some contracts to go meet with them. Yeah, we didn't get a chance to talk about it. They come up with one excuse after the other. And then I went back about 6 months later, and guess what? Interest rates bumped up a notch, right? Guess what? All the refi money went away. Guess what? I went there, I couldn't get in. You know why? The door was padlocked. So I'm not saying that's going to happen to you, but just don't take the easy deals. Do what you need to do. You know better what you need to do than I do. If you don't know, I think Stu does. When we go, they know. We're one of the most skilled people. You know what you have to do. Just do that. Even when you're too busy now. And that's what the sales activity plan is all about. Because look, one of my favorite sayings is when you're up to your neck in alligators, sometimes it's hard to remember that your original purpose was to drain the swamp. So I'll give it the last example. I always say that. But my daughter got married on August 13th, 2005. So I'm a bug on tracking my activity. So when every kid got married, there's a lot of stuff. Not that much for the father of the bride. Pretty much your only real activity is signing checks. They come to you with a lot of questions like, what do you think of these invitations? You like these or these? I said they both look good. Which one do you like? I like this one. That's my favorite one. So that's kind of what I did for about 6 months or a year. Anyway, so I was tracking my activity, but I wasn't paying enough attention to it. When she got married, a week later, I'm looking at my pipeline, and it's weak. I mean, what the hell happened? And I went back and I analyzed the activity over the previous 6 or 8 months, and it was low, but I didn't see it to be low. The cumulative asking about a month's worth of activity didn't get done over an 8-month period. So I had nobody in the pipeline. So I don't know if you're still back on that time. But I said, you know what I'm going to do? I need to do activity. So I had this group of 8 or 9 people that was black belt. It was a networking group for me. They were giving me referrals. I challenged them between now and Christmas, from September 1 to Christmas. We had a Christmas party like when I was 15. I said, whoever gets the most referrals wins the prize. I said, except you guys are so competitive, you won't give me any referrals, so I can't possibly win. I'm going to compete with you by making cold calls. And I'm good. I'm going to beat you by making cold calls. So I started taking it. But I got to tell you, I mean, a really good end to the story, but I keep the pants off and right, I win the prize. I can't look at that. And, but in that 4-month period, remember that's where I told you about that being the sales manager, that's where those prospects are showing up. Right? Because I did that activity, and as soon as I started making cold calls, and people like Robert, one day I got this referral for something. I found out in my career is when I did the activity, stuff happened. When I didn't do the activity, nothing happened.